Story 1. I was raised to believe I was an android. From an early age I was told my father had built me, and that I was built to help the family. Any feelings or thoughts that differed from his programming were to be reported to him as a malfunction that he would fix. It didn't take me long to associate malfunctions with pain, and I reported them less and less over the years. I slept in the basement in a box with a thin layer of foam and a pillow. I didn't go to school. I didn't know school even exist. My education, if you can call it, that was a list of books on topics to upload. Most of these books were on topics useful to my parents, such as basic plumbing and electrical work, cooking, gardening, and those written by my father on my programming. My mother would then give me a list of questions to answer about these books to ensure the upload was successful. Sometimes the questions would be tricks, or I would answer them incorrectly. In the eyes of my outraged father, my uploads were almost always successful. I had nothing but time and the intense fear of corrupting my processors if I didn't properly concentrate. Writing this now, so many years later, it does sound ridiculous that as a child unexposed to the world, I only had my parents to guide me between uploads and maintenance. I had tasks to complete. This included mowing the lawn, tending the garden, cooking meals, cleaning and fixing things such as lawn mowers, washing machines, dryers, and fridges. There was no downtime. I always had broken things to fix. I later found out my father would sell these once I had fixed them. When I was 17 years old, I didn't know birthdays or my age. But this is what police have told me. My father had to stop work and decided it was time for me to earn some money. The thought scared me, but I obeyed orders as I had been programmed to do. My father would send me to do cash jobs, mowing lawns, and doing general yard work. He would usually wait in the car until I was done or leave and come back if no one was home. During these times he would put me on mute mode and said that he would know if I spoke with anyone. It was forbidden. If I malfunctioned, there would be serious consequences. No one ever approached or spoke with me. Even if they had arrived home, Beth or my father returned, they would make their way inside without a word. I discovered later that he had told his clients I was deaf and mute and liked to be left alone to finish the job. It was simple. He would drop me off on a large property. I would do my job and we would leave. One day I was mowing a regular's house. No cars were in the driveway, so my father left me to do the job. Shortly after, a girl came out with a drink. She looked the same age as me, and for a moment I considered she may be an android too. "It's pretty hot outside. I thought you might want this," she said, handing me a black drink. "It's Pepsi. I hope that's okay." She smiled. I had no idea what Pepsi was. It was black, like the oil Mother made me drink, so I thought it should be okay. I still remember that first sip. It was the single greatest thing I had tasted. It didn't leave my mind feeling scrambled like my mother's drink. I wanted to ask what Pepsi was, whereas he got this drink from. Did she make it? I haven't seen you around. What school did you go to? Pepsi girl asked. I put my head down and walked back to my mower. What was I supposed to do? "You're not even going to say thank you," she quipped, following me. I looked back at her. She made me nervous for reasons I was yet to know about. "I have to work," I replied to her Without another word she huffed and walked away. I spent the rest of the day counting down the minutes until my father came to pick me up. I was convinced they would know I had gone off mute, that I had spoken to someone. When my father's dusty red wagon pulled up, I loaded my gear into the car and got in. No words were spoken. I felt a small sense of relief, but a small voice in the back of my head spoke to me. He may not know now, but wait till you get home. Nothing was out of the usual that night. I did my chores, worked on my uploads, and recharged my batteries. The rest of the week was business. As usual, my father was in one of his moods that lasted from days to weeks. The longer the mood, the more aggressive he would get with me. The small voice in the back of my head spoke to me once, or maybe he really doesn't know. Maybe he is lying. Once this seed had been planted, over the next few months its roots took hold of me. The rare moments I was left alone, I did something I'd never done before. I watched TV, though usually on mute, and in short intervals I started seeing images of the outside world. Happy families, cartoons, and animals. It was mesmerizing and terrifying at the same time. The day that changed my life, however, was the day I turned on the TV and caught a glimpse of iRobot, real androids that had sown real doubts within me. Though I knew something was inherently wrong about my situation, I didn't know what to do. Eventually, I was sent back to Pepsi Girl's house and got to work. I was really hoping she would bring me some more, but didn't get my hopes up. I was almost done mowing the lawn when she pulled into the property. I watched her drive up to the house and get out. A part of me screamed to talk to her. I thought of the scenarios carefully. I would find out the truth about myself. She may tell my father, and my malfunction would need to be fixed. I might get Pepsi. I caught her at the door, almost out of breath, from running, and she turned to look at me with a glare. Am I an android? Father says I'm an android, I blurted out. Android? She asked, raising her eyebrows. I told her everything that I've told you and about the movie I'd seen with real androids. She stood quietly. I guessed she was trying to make sense of it all. I heard footsteps behind me and immediately lost all my courage. My father said nothing and grabbed my arm, pulling me away. I looked back at her, still with the same perplexed look she wore when I first approached her. I had blown it. That night was the worst NIGT of my life. The fixing my father did was worse than ever before, and now I knew. I am something, I'm someone. The seams were splitting. My father no longer bothered with the usual half-assed facade that had become so apparent to me now. It was just straight punishment. Both my parents tried scaring me, telling me stories of police and the outside world. They were both furious, but also shaken. I wasn't allowed out of the basement. After that, the days passed slowly, and my parents' screaming matches were the only form of stimulation I had. I would put my ear to the door to try hear what they were saying. One sentence drove fear into me that I didn't know I had. I'm going to shut it down for good. I was at it. I heard someone homing down the steps and fled from the door. My father pushed it open, but stayed outside. I stared at him from across the room, uncertain of what I was supposed to do. He threw a shovel into the room, and it clanged against the floor, breaking the silence. Come, he said, motioning me out of the room. I obeyed his commands and was led into the backyard. We walked further out onto the property before he ordered me tea. "Oh, dig a hole? What am I digging for?" I asked him. "What the fuck is with all these questions? What happened to you? I didn't program you right." My father had to be in his 60s at least, but this shriveled-up man still terrified me. "Are you going to shut me down?" "Yeah, that's right. Gonna shut you down and get a new one. One that can keep its fucking mouth shut." A half-smile appeared on Father's face, as if satisfied with himself. That smile pissed me off. That man pissed me off. As much as he scared me, I thought of what I was missing, though I didn't to even know what I was missing apart from the magical world I had put together through the TV shows I'd seen. I thought of Pepsi Girl, I thought of the fucking Pepsi, and then all the pain this man had caused me. I clenched the shovel and swung at him, connecting with the side of his face. The sound rung out into the night, but no part of me was sticking around to enjoy it. My father hit the ground and I started running. There was no plan. I hadn't intended for this to happen and had no clue where I was going or where I should be going. After cutting through a few properties, I finally stopped running. I collapsed into some tall grass and caught my breath. The stars were beautiful. It was the first time I'd be out at night on my own, and despite the fear and uncertainty, was the most beautiful night of my life. I decided I would go to Pepsi Girl's house. I knew it was close and had an idea of where it was. I continued walking and found myself at the driveway just as the sun was coming up. I knocked on the door until a worried man came out to greet me. I told him everything I'd told his daughter, and he believed me. Thank God he believed me. The police arrived at the house, to find my father with a gun in his mouth. He had already disposed of my mother. They told him to put it down, but he pulled the trigger, and it was over. Over for them, but not for me. My life was just beginning. It was revealed to me that they weren't really my parents. They had stolen me, stolen my childhood, my mind. And at times I wonder if they just might still steal my sanity. Thank God for malfunctions. Thank you, Gary, Emily, and Grace Pepsi Girl. Thank you, Story 2, the 2 figurines. It was around Thanksgiving when my grandparents came to visit. It had been almost 2 years since I and my younger brother and sister, Eric and Brina, got to see them. They were always so lively when they came around. For an old man, my grandpa had a very interesting hobby. He collected action figures, any sorts of them. He had collections of He-Man figurines, to Power Rangers, to the Thundercats. But the best part about them coming to town was that every time my grandpa came, he always brought a small collection for us to play with, never to keep. But it was always fun playing with some of his favorite toys with them. As our grandparents entered our home, to stay for the weekend, my mother greeted them with a smile. She always had at least a grin on her face. She was one of the most ecstatic people that I've ever seen. She always seems to bring light to a dark day. Not just to me and my siblings, but to everyone it seems. But for some reason, my grandmother never came through the door, and my grandpa walked in with a blank look in his eyes. They looked dead to me, which is the complete opposite of what they usually generate. He didn't even say hello. He just walked in with a bag in his hand. My mother asked him, "Where's Mom?" That of which my grandpa only replied with, "She went away for a while." This puzzled my mother. I could see it in her facial expressions. She tried to bring up more on the subject, but Grandpa quickly dismissed it as if it were no big deal, and to stop talking about it. So she did, thinking they must be going through some troubles that he would rather not discuss, just as my mother and my father had. Grandpa looked over at Brina, who was currently taking a nap on the couch, and gave an almost sinister smirk, one that I've never seen on his face in my entire life. Isn't it fascinating how easy it is to watch someone sleep? He said. He and my mom moved into the kitchen, where I finally gave my greetings. "Hi, Grandpa. How've you been?" he replied with a quizzical stare. What was wrong with my grandfather? Why was he not so jumpy and delightful as his previous visits? I dismissed the abstract, silent reply and move on to my next subject. "What's in the bag?" Again, he looked at me with that same stare, but this time he spoke. "Just some figurines I found." He dumped out the bag, which was much more empty than usual. Instead of the 10 or 12 action figures he usually brought, what fell from the bag were 2 very old, very creepy-looking, tiny action figures. I quickly picked them up to look at them. At first glance they looked like regular old action figures, but the odd thing was, I'd never seen them in my life. No cartoon I've ever seen or anything have ever had these characters. One looked like an old man, his face riddled with dirt and grime. He was wielding what looked like a short dagger. He was also in loin-cloth robes. The other one also had the face of an old man, but he was wielding a hatchet. His face was also covered in dirt. He also had no clothes to accommodate his figurine body. He looked like one of my sister's Ken dolls that she lost all the clothes to. They were the 2 creepiest dolls that I've ever seen, but on the other hand, as I held them, I began to enjoy them. I had an inexplicable urge to put them in my pocket and keep them. I looked up at my grandfather, ready to ask him where he got them, but when I was about to open my mouth, I noticed his expression changed again. He looked as if he was in a silent rage, staring at the dolls, and then almost instantly, why at me. There was a fire in his dead eyes as he spoke. "Give them to me. Now." I looked at him startled, but by then he had tried lunging at me for the 2 figurines. I, being as scared as I was from the incident, shot backwards to avoid his advance toward me. My grandfather's knee must have faltered in his attempt to grab the 2 figurines, because quickly he fell to the ground. My mother quickly reached down and tried to pick him up, but by then he was clutching his heart and gasping for air in a rather terrifying way. My mother called 911, but he was dead before the ambulance could arrive from a heart attack. In the next week, my grandfather's funeral had taken place. We had no way to contact my grandmother. We had no idea where she could be. So the funeral went on without her. But even whilst all of these sad events were taking place, my obsession for these 2 figurines began to grow rapidly. Not so much the old man with the hatchet as the man with the dagger. My brother Eric had subsequently taken a great liking to the man with the hatchet, so I gave it to him. It seemed like no matter where we went, we always had our figurines with us. In my experience with the dagger-wielding old man, it gave me a sort of spark in my soul. There's really no other way to describe it. It kept me eccentric and happy in a weird sense. In the next coming months, though, things had changed. I began to resent the old figurine. It stared at me in the most menacing way, and for some reason made it unable for me to sleep. I knew I should get rid of the doll, but I can't. I've tried many times, but I always seem to pick it back up. I can never be rid of it. Not to mention the fact that it was giving me nightmares, and normal nightmares either. Ones where people are watching me sleep and try to murder me, but more the other way around. I would have dreams of myself being in my brother or mother's room with a dagger just as the old man figurine has, and just watching them sleep, always in the shadow of the corners, never getting to close. And not a nightmare that you realize that you imagine so many different events in a small amount of time. It wasn't that way at all. I would stand there for hours and just watch them sleep and do nothing, just watch. These nightmares scared me, but there was nothing that I could do. My brother was just as silent and lifeless anymore as I was, and we had both began to grow apart from our mother and sister. So silence was our only option, and for now at age had been sufficing. One night I woke up startled. I looked around my room to see nothing was there, but felt a cold wetness in my sheets. I reached down and felt the wet area. It seemed I had wet the bed. Oh great, how am I going to explain this to my mother? I got up and immediately looked for my figuring. I've gotten to the point where I go nowhere without it, but couldn't find it. It pained me to go anywhere without my seemingly life companion, but I decided just to head to my mother's room. I stepped through her slightly cracked door and walked to her bed. I nudged her, trying to wake her up to tell her the embarrassing thing I had done. It was 3 a.m. and very dark in her bedroom with no windows. I tried nudging her again, but something was wrong. She was also wet. I turned on a small light on her bedstand and stood there, awestruck. There, lying in bed, was the cold, lifeless, blood-soaked body of my murdered mother. I looked at myself. I was covered in blood, and my mother looked like she had been carved, like someone had been trying to cut pieces out of her. And there, sitting in her neck, was a dagger. I grabbed it and pulled it out of her neck. Its blood-soaked blade shined in the dim light of the lamp, and I just stood there terrified. Most people scream when they're scared, but I was past that point. I couldn't then muster a sound out of my throat. I froze, scared to even turn around. I glanced around my dead mother, and sitting there on the top of the covers was my figurine, dagger in hand, laying there like my mother was holding it before she fell asleep. Out of instinct, I quickly grabbed it, and once I did, I felt its spark come into me again. Without being frightened or worrying about my mother any more, I looked at her body once again. All I could think of was, isn't it fascinating how easy it is to watch someone sleep? I took the dagger and my figurine and walked ever so slowly into my brother Eric's room. For no apparent reason, I just felt the urge. I had to. I crept into his room and hid in the shadows. Staring at his bed, I saw the mound in his bed that was his helpless, sleeping body, and I watched him. I watched him for what seemed to be about 2 hours, the whole time only thinking, isn't it fascinating how why it is to watch someone sleep? It was almost 5 a.m. now, and I was still just watching him when I had another thought flow through my head, this one not in my own voice, but what seemed the voice of an old man. Cut him Nicholas got him without a second thought, and, clutching the blood-stained dagger in one hand and figurine in the other, I walked over to his bed. I lifted the dagger and plunged it into the mound that was my brother, but it felt soft and like a body. I quickly lifted the covers to see that my brother was not in his bed at all. It was just a mound of covers and pillows that seemed made out to look like a person. I stared at the mound, quizzical of what was going on, and then looked at my figurine. "What have you done to me?" Abruptly I heard a footstep behind me. I spun around to see my brother stepping out from behind his curtains, the moonlight shining on his blood-stained face and nightshirt. I looked right and saw the mangled, shredded corpse of our sister. I looked back at him. He had obviously been there a while, considering he couldn't get there without walking right by where I was standing in the first place, and he just stared at me with a hatchet in his hand and his figurine in the other as he said, "Isn't it fascinating how easy it is to watch someone watch you sleep?" Story 3. The Woman from the Beach. I still remember a nightmare I had when I was about 5 years old. I was near the ocean that I love so much, with just my dad and I playing on a swing set in the middle of an abandoned beach. Everything started out very innocently. I remember having the time of my life, smiling and laughing while playing with my father. After what I recall was a couple minutes of fun, the scene started to develop a sense of unease and discomfort. The sunny, beautiful day turned dark and cloudy. Even the once inviting swing set seemed to become slightly more sinister. It started howling intensely and stopped as suddenly as it began. My dad at this point noticed my apparent discomfort and attempted to invigorate the once happy mood I was feeling. He started dancing around in the puddles of sand and water while making funny faces at me. I began to start laughing again when suddenly he bent over and placed his face in one of the larger puddles. My smile disappeared and I started to feel slightly hesitant. I called out to him softly after he hadn't pulled up his face. A couple of seconds later, he pulled up his head and turned toward me. At this point, I would start screaming and wake up in my childhood bedroom, screaming my head off, feeling clammy and cold. My father would always rush in to comfort me, and I was always filled with a great relief that his face was still intact. When my dad turned his head to look at me in my dream, his face was gone. There was nothing left where his eye sockets, nose, and mouth used to be. His face was literally just a blank slate with sand dripping down from his chin. To this day, I am not sure why that dream has startled me so much that I remember it quite clearly 27 years later. I am also unsure why the dream repeats itself most nights of the week, leaving me to wake up in a state of panic every time. This morning was no exception, and I woke up to my sheets soaked with sweat and feeling the sticky aftermath of the nightmare. I sighed and struggled to my feet, noticing it was about time for me to wake up for work anyway. I was wiping the sleep from my eyes while I walked to the bathroom, and with one half-open eyeball, I noticed my face in the mirror. I let out a startled cry when I realized my face was gone. I closed my eyes as tightly as I could and told myself to get a grip. I had just closed my eyes. Obviously, they still exist on my face. After a couple minutes of struggling with myself to not be such a wimp, I opened my eyes and saw that my face looked exactly the same as it had last night, if a little disheveled from sleep. I laughed slightly to myself from my own paranoia and told myself my brain was just scaring me since the memory of my nightmare was so fresh. I went about the rest of my morning ritual, exercising, showering, eating, and feeding my cat. Even though I convinced myself logically what the cause of my mirror incident was, I still couldn't shake my feeling of unease and avoided looking into any mirrors the entire morning. It was a beautiful day, and because of my unexpectedly early awakening, I had extra time and decided to walk to work. I only worked about a half-hour walk from my apartment in downtown Collegeville, Pennsylvania. It's an adorable little town, so I grateful why I enjoy my walk and soaked in all of the fabulous scenery. I consider myself to be a professional window shopper since I'm consistently broke, and I use my talent to the fullest this morning to shake myself from my growing paranoia. While I was looking through the glass at a particularly adorable pair of cheetah print stilettos, I caught a glimpse of a woman with a blank, featureless face standing directly behind me. I gasped and quickly turned to face the woman. Once I turned, I saw a woman standing behind me with a perfectly normal face. I must have looked downright insane because she regarded me with a skeptical expression. I quickly apologized and shuffled to work. The rest of my day at work was blissfully uneventful, and I was eventually able to calm myself down and convince myself both blank face occurrences. This was the easiest way to refer to the incidents or just a result of my overactive imagination. I walked home in a better mood than I had been all day, and even treated myself by buying the stilettos from earlier, even if it would cost me gas money for the week. I live alone with 2 cats, Mo and Beevil, so I made myself dinner and fed my fur babies, then settled in on my couch with a glass of Moscato and a new book. I must have dozed off at some point during my reading because I awoke in a cold sweat from my torturous, repetitive nightmare. I attempted to calm myself by petting my adorable tortoise shell, Beevil, who was sitting on my lap. From my hand touching her, she woke from her probably 5th nap of the day and looked up at me. I let out the loudest scream I could even imagine myself capable of and jumped about 10 feet high. My poor, lovely kitty was missing her face. It didn't appear to be a violent or malevolent occurrence. Her face was just simply gone. I quickly found the cat carrier, shoved her in, and ran her straight to the vet, panicking and driving like a mad woman the entire way there. I rushed into the vet's office and demanded my cat be examined right that second. Seeing my panicked demeanor, the vet quickly took us into a room and let my cat out of the carrier. She walked out of the pet carrier and looked up at me, with her beautiful green eyes looking right into mine. Her face was completely fine. I must have still been dreaming when I thought she had lost her teeth. The vet was now looking at me curiously and asked what the issue seemed to be. Not wanting to appear insane, I made up a story of thinking she swallowed dental floss. The vet examined her, fed me a decent amount, and sent us on our way, telling me she would be perfectly fine. We drove home, and I went straight to bed. That incident happened about a week ago, and since then the blank face occurrences have only gotten worse. I see a faceless woman standing behind me in every reflection I dare let myself view. I have stopped going to work or anywhere out in public because no matter how hard I try, I simply could not avoid each and every singly reflective surface. I would rather have been a shut-in than have to see that woman's blank face again. I had temporarily given my cats to my sister, terrified for their safety. I had also gotten rid of every single reflective surface in my house. I was honestly unaware if I am truly insane or if I really am being stalked by a faceless woman with the ability to change my perception of reality. Maybe I should have gone see a psychologist. Maybe I was just overworked. Every time I started to think that way and decided to brave and go out into the world, I would relapse into a panic attack and ended up shivering violently under a blanket on my couch. I had the dream again tonight, but it's different. There's the beach, the swing set, my father, and the rain, but this time there's a woman. She is standing with her back to us the entire time, and from what I can see of her, she is about average height with long, matted, dark hair. It hangs from her head in knotted, bloody patches. The skin on her arms and legs is pale and sickly in appearance, loosely hanging from her bone. She has many open sores that bleed profusely. She doesn't turn around until my dad places his face in the water. Time seems to stand still as she moves over to him with her nasty, easy hair covering her face. She places her hand on the back of his head and shoves it even further into the sand. I'm screaming at her to let him go, to leave him alone, but my voice disappears with the wind. She pushes his head even harder into the sand puddle, making it appear as though the sand is literally grinding away his face. It's at this point she finally looks up at me, and I realize she is the woman I've seen haunt me in every reflection. She had no face, just a blank space with bloody sores where her features should have been. The most terrifying part of this moment is that even though she had virtually no face, I could feel that she was smiling at me, taunting me, and driving me insane. I woke up screaming and thrashing in my sheets like a wild woman. I bolted up in bed and immediately noticed my large mirror on my bureau has been uncovered. The minute my eyes meet my reflection, I see the faceless woman with her nasty, bloody hair standing directly behind my head. I could feel her evil, taunting grin pointing down toward me as I felt her hands cover my face. I woke up again in my bed, relieved that last night was just an awful remix to my repetitive nightmare. My relief was short-lived as I reached up to rub the sleep away from my eyes and felt nothing where my socket should be. I feel an immense sense of terror about to overwhelm me. When I realized I could still see, so my eyes had to be there, I rushed to my bureau and uncovered my large mirror. I attempted to let out a scream at the image that confronted me, but I was unable to make any sound. My face was gone, where my blue eyes and full lips used to be. Now there was nothing but a blank space that made me look like a deformed monster. I don't understand how I can still see and breathe. It's as though there is a thin layer of skin over my facial features that enables me to feel normal while looking like a freak on the outside. I have tried to cut off the layer of skin that seems to cover my face, only to feel an immense pain and see nothing reveal but blood. No matter how deep I cut, I never find the eye sockets or nose that I used to have. At least the nightmare has finally stopped. The woman from my dreams seems to have moved on to torture another poor soul. Story 4. The Quiet House. Okay, so my story is actually one my grandmother told me about a house near Wattower. Ere she grew up, I think she was about 12 when it happened, so it was probably around 1933, 34. So she grew up in South Carolina, kind of out in the middle of nowhere, and if you went even further out, past the main shops and through the back roads, and all the way out where there was nothing but woods and grass, there was a family who built a house out there. S.H. He said they hunted deer and squirrel, and that's pretty much all they ate. They never came into town. No one ever saw them. So of course all the kids in the neighborhood want to see these people. Rumors are running rampant about who they are and what they do and stuff. So every now and then some teenagers would go up there and try to sneak a look. But no one is ever brave enough to actually get close. They always hear something and come out running, which is what my grandmother said she wished had happened that night. So anyway, she was 12 and she had an older sister who was 6, and at the time her name was Lucy. All my grandmother ever wanted to do was to hang out with the older kids, that they would drink and smoke, so they didn't really want her around. But then this one time, it was just Lucy and her boyfriend, Ronald. They were sitting outside talking about that house in the woods. I guess the subject came up every now and then because, small town, Oh, Ronald said no one had ever really seen them up close, 'cause they were too scared to go up there. But then he corrected himself. He said there was only person who ever went up to the house and actually went inside, but he came back wrong. He said it was this guy Gary, who everyone in town knew as the crazy old man, so no one listened to him. But Ronald told them that Gary was the bravest of his group of friends when he was a teenager. It must have been just before the 20s. He actually went inside once. He never told anyone what he saw or what happened because his friends didn't want for him. They just took off while he was in there, and the next time they saw him he was just, quiet. He just mumbled and every now and then and stared ahead, not really paying attention. Since it was around their graduation time, his group of friends all split up anyway, but Gary stayed. He didn't have parents. He lived above the grocery store where he worked, and he's been crazy ever since. Everyone just assumed he was always crazy. Of course, my grandma didn't believe this story. She knew Gary, and she was certain, like everyone else, that he had always been touched, as she calls it. She wasn't really scared of anything. She just wanted to hang with the older kids. So she told them she would go to the house and even go inside if they let her hang out with him all night. Her sister said no way, but her boyfriend, Ronald, convinced her. He said she would be too scared to get close anyway, and it would be funny. So they all piled into his pickup and drove out. It was around 7, so the sun had just set, and they were out in the boonies. So basically there's no light at all. It was total darkness by the time they got to the path that led to the house. He pulled over in case the family had rifles or shotguns. Back then there wasn't much in the way of gun laws, and even now, it's South Carolina. So they hiked it, and I guess it was much longer than they realized. By the time they got close to the house, they had been walking for like 10 minutes. so they were really far into the woods. So they get to where they can see the house. The moon was the only source of light. They didn't want to bring flashlights in case the family saw them. So Lucy and Ronald stay back in the path, and they send my grandmother, the little 12-year-old, out to go up to the house alone. Oh, and it's also important to mention that by now there's marsh all around. The only dry area is the path she's on, so she's making her way to the house, and she keeps hearing something making splashes in the water. But she grew up around marshes, so she doesn't pay any mind to it. She knows it's probably duck or something. Course she starts getting jittery about it when she realizes it's getting louder as she gets closer to the house, and it's getting closer to her too. She can't see anything that's not directly under moonlight, so she TS and tries to focus on the sound, but it's stopped too. By now she's only a few feet from the house, so she basically says screw it and runs up. She puts her eyes between the boards that are nailed across a window and looks inside. It's really dark, but she says it didn't matter because she could see by the moonlight that there was nothing in the house at all, no furniture or anything. She Lost laughed, thinking all this time people have been so scared to come to an empty house the family isn't even there anymore. And then she heard the splashing again. It was behind her now. Hey, see, crossed the path. She walked away from the house and went behind a tree to try to see what it was, but trying to make sure it couldn't see her. She peeked around the tree, and she saw that whatever it was, it had a head full of long, matted hair. Boo! Ronald and Lucy grabbed her from behind and scared the ever-loving crap out of her. She was so angry she didn't even tell them she had seen, or almost seen something. She just ran back down the path towards the truck, hoping whatever it was would come out and eat them or something. But I guess by this time she didn't really believe she saw anything really. She assumed it was seaweed caught on a tree, as these things always turned out to be, and plus, she was happy they came down the path so she wasn't alone, which, as it turned out, now she was. She thought about stopping and waiting for them, but she wanted them to know how angry she was, so she just kept walking. She got to the truck. When she looked up, she saw Ronald and Lucy leaning, waiting. They saw her eyes turn to big white saucers and asked if she was okay. She just ran to the truck and told them it was time to go. The whole time she stared down the path, waiting for whoever it was that had been pretending to be her sister and her boyfriend to show up and attack them, but they took off before anything happened. The whole ride home she was quiet. She didn't know what to make of what happened, so she didn't make anything of it. She just closed her eyes and listened to the road all the way home. No one else talked either, so it was easy for her to drift off. She woke up just as they pulled into the driveway. Her sister kept saying delicious, delicious, but she didn't know what they were talking about and didn't really care. She just wanted to go home, to take a shower, sleep, and forget everything. She hopped off the truck and they called after her, "Don't you want to hang out any more?" Ronald Washington asked the one asking. Her sister just looked at her and smiled. She said no and went inside. She said it wasn't until she was taking a shower that she realized she had smelled something the whole time. She woke up in the truck. Blood. She looked down, and sure enough there it was, a long thin stream coming from her legs and circling the drain. I know it sounds gross, but it wasn't her period or anything. She was still too young, though she thought it might be for a second, until she realized it wasn't coming from her leg. She wasn't sure where it was coming from actually, so she got out. As soon as she turned the shower off, her sister knocked on the door. "I thought you was coming with us. We're going to get burgers at the Shanty Shack. Come on." Her sister had this friendly kind of tone in her voice. It seemed like maybe she was really sorry for making her go up to the house, but even then, that's not how Lucy usually reacted to being sorry. She would pretty much act like nothing happened and just be cordial with you. She'd never actually be nice. And then my grandmother heard it again, her sister whispering it behind the door. "Delicious, delicious," and that S when she felt the sting on the back of her neck. It had been there the whole time, she just didn't realize it. It was very small, but so deep it still hadn't stopped bleeding. There was a tiny little window in the bathroom that faced the driveway. She looked out and saw Lucy marching with Ronald, both pissed beyond words and yelling. How could she leave us like that? All we did was scare her a little. My shoes are all worn, and she took your truck. How'd she even learn to drive? There was another knock on the bathroom door. "I just want a little more," it said. Then, as the couple came into the house, she heard a smash. The window in the hallway was broken. Her real sister showed up, and my grandmother hugged her tighter than ever before. Whatever it was in the hall was gone now. Of course, she didn't sleep through the night for weeks after that. The worst part. Well, all of it is the worst part. But the worst part for her, and I think for me, is that every now and then she would wake up, the window would be open, and the back of her neck would be bleeding again. I asked if she didn't think she scratched herself in her sleep. She said maybe, but it wasn't until she saw the blood when she woke up that she remembered having a dream about a caterpillar that would burrow into the back of her neck. The whole time she would keep hearing a voice repeating, "Delicious, delici, as, delicious." Story 5. The whole time, I'm not sure when I started thinking of him again. It had been at least 16 years. I had pretty much forgotten about him up till that point. I went about my life as a waitress and dishwasher for a small town diner, the only place to get food aside from the Jiffy Mart and garage just up the street. The town had countless legends that involved death of some form, involving creatures that most people laughed at. Late one night, when only the regulars were there, everyone decided to pitch together and tell me some of the stories. I had just moved there 2 months before and still hadn't had the time to listen in on the latest encounters with the local creatures. They started it off by telling me about the rake and how it drove its victims to insanity by demanding impossible things from them, or perching at the foot of their bed night after night waiting for them to wake up so it could kill them. I laughed it off. "That doesn't sound that bad," I said. At least it was trying to get it over with Neely, the man who told the story, often irritation. "Tell about the operator." "The what?" I asked. "That sounds like a bad horror movie I saw once." "Don't laugh, Gina," the owner said. "He's real. Ever wonder why you don't see kids in this town, or why the school is shut down? He lives there. He takes children and then goes after their families. He dates back as far as anyone knows. He took the waitress you replaced and her son. Aha, and pigs fly. I said, I don't doubt that. They exist. They just don't scare me. What about those cryptids you like so much? Do any of those scare you? Sean was my favorite person I had met in this small town. He was 2 years older than me and loved to listen to my tales about the cryptids my parents had chased throughout my childhood. Yeah, lots of them scare me. I saw a few of them, I said. It was something I never really talked about. But since these crazy small-town folks believe their own legends, I supposed they would believe me, and I told them what I had seen. What scares you the most? Jean asked. I mean, one that you've seen. I sat back in the chair I had dragged behind the counter and pondered which one scared me the most. The Dover demon, I said. It scares me because it looks like an alien, and I have a phobia of them. All it does is wait to scare people, but it freaks me out. On looks alone, the Cree Indians even have it in their stories. It's not the one that scares me the most, but it's a close-assy. Con, what scares you the most, then? Neely asked. Pox was all I said. I stood up and went into the back to finish up the dishes. There was no way I was telling them about Pox at night. They would have to wait until a day when I was off work and could come by during the day to tell them his story. Story 6. I found a mask in the basement. I pulled the mask over my face and crept up the stairs, my excitement mounting with each creaky step. I felt the heat of my own breath, unable to fully escape through the mouth slit. When I got to the top, I cracked open the basement door and peered into the living room through 2 round eye holes. She wasn't there, but I knew where she was. I could hear tap water running. She was in the kitchen. I slipped off my shoes and walked slowly, carefully across the hardwood floor. The rush of running water grew louder, and then I heard the sound of someone talking. Did she have visitors? I took a few more quiet steps. No, she was Lee, standing to a podcast over the speakers. I stuck my head around the corner, and there she was at the sink, her back towards me, her long brunette hair pulled up into a bun. I took a deep breath. It was hot in there, under that heavy mask, but I couldn't take it off. Not until it was done. It was time. I moved quickly until I was right behind her. I reached out and grabbed her shoulder. She snapped her head around, and as she got a look at me, I smiled behind the mask to see her eyes go wide in fear. I was prepared to end it there, but she screamed and brought a can. Up, right into my balls. Oof. As I was hunching over, she gave me a shove, and I crashed into the island behind me. I slumped to the ground in agony and looked in real fear as she twirled around, grabbed a knife from the sink, and raised it up. Hold on, I groaned, pulling my mask off. It's me. When she saw me, she froze, the giant knife still up in the air. I could tell that my wife was not very impressed. What the fuck are you doing? She asked. Where the fuck did you get that creepy mask? I coughed, still holding my hand up in the air, in a plea for mercy, down in the basement. I think it was Dad's, I said. I was just trying to give you a little scare. For fun. Jesus, Bill, said Debbie. I was ready to kill you, and honestly, I'm still not quite decided on that. There's not a jury in America that would convict me, not after they saw that creepy-ass mask. Put the knife down, honey, I said. She threw the knife back into the sink and bent down. I was still crumpled in pain on the floor. "Let me see that," she said, picking up the mask and then examining it. I guessed that it was made of stone. It was perfectly and with two round eye holes at levels just different enough to cause a sense of unease. There was, as mentioned, a slit for a mouth. A row of sharp teeth was etched above and below the mouth, and then an other row on top of those. "It's heavy," said Debbie, "and looks ancient. Do you think your father found this on one of his exhibitions?" "Yeah," I said, starting to recover a little. "It was in a stash box down in the basement, along with a knife that looks like it's made of bone. I was gonna bring the knife up with me, but now I'm glad I didn't. We should get it assessed," said Debbie, running her fingers over the mask. "Could be worth something." "I'm sure it is," said, getting to my feet on wobbly legs. "But I was hoping we could keep it, at least for a while, as a memento of Dad. I mean, if we ever need money, then yeah, we'll look into selling it. But we don't need money right now, not after the inheritance. And, well, I just still miss him, you know. Plus, it's a cool mask, isn't it? A good conversation starter." She handed the mask back. "It's creepy. It scared the shit out of me," she sighed. "If you want to hang it out somewhere, it's got to go in your study, someplace where I don't have to look at it. Asterisk, 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 asterisk." It was Roger Wentworth's retirement party. Old Roger had been my father's friend since they both started teaching at the college where I now taught. They spent many an evening sipping on scotch at my father's house where I now lived. So when he finally announced his retirement, it only felt right to host the party. Eric Nielsen was in attendance. He was about my age and also taught at the college. It turned out that we actually grew up in that same town a few years apart. While my life had been pretty much easy street since day one, born to a well-off professor and following in his footsteps, Derek's had been anything but. He came from a working-class family and had lost his father at a young age. He never talked about it, but I knew that his childhood had been rough. Yet he had clawed himself out of a life of misery to find success in the academic world. Most of the other professors at our college were the same as me, born and bred in a buttermilk world of soft pillows and fancy cars. Derek stood out to me, and we became fast friends. On the evening of Roger's party, as soon as I saw Derek walk in, I excused myself from the conversation that I was having. I went to the fridge, got 2 beers, and found Derek. "Come on," I said. "I want to show why. Ooh, something. You'll appreciate this." Derek took the beer and popped off the cap with a lighter. "Sure thing, bud," he said. I led him to my study. "I found this mask in a box of the old man's stuff. Check it out." I pointed up to the mask hanging from the wall. The bone knife was mounted just below it. Derek dropped his beer on the floor and went white. "Is this some kind of sick fucking joke?" he demanded. What do you mean a joke?" The look of fear on Derek's face made me start to feel scared. "It can't be the mask, can it? It's unsettling, but it's not terrifying like that." "I need to sit down," said Derek. "Sure, bud," I said, wheeling my desk chair over to him. "Sorry about that. I didn't mean to scare you. I just thought you'd get a kick out of it, that's all." Derek looked at me with intensity. Tell me right now if this is a joke. I never told you about this. But maybe you found out anyway. I don't know W. What you mean? I said I need a drink. Sure. Beer, something hard, said Derek, now staring at the mask in bewilderment. I'll be right back. I stepped over the spilled beer and headed over to the liquor cabinet. Debbie was there, talking to somebody. I was starting to feel a little dizzy, and things were blurring together. Where did you get off to? Asked Debbie. I showed Derek the mask. I said it, didn't go well. I poured out a tall scotch. We should really get rid of that thing. It's creepy. I gave a vacant nod and went back to my study. Derek was Saint Hill sitting there, transfixed by the mask. I handed him the scotch, and he looked at me with a start. He downed it in one gulp, and then began. 35 years ago, my father committed suicide. Oh, I said, looking down at my shoes, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I don't tell people that, and I definitely don't tell them what happened after that. Look, can you just bring the bot? Lan, I was glad to get out of the room for a moment. Things had gotten intense in there. I needed to know why Derek was having such an extreme reaction to the mask, and he was my friend, so I wanted to support H.M. I just didn't know if I was capable of hearing whatever he was going to say. I needed the bottle as much as him, or so I thought at the time. And I was right. I grabbed the bottle from the liqueur cabinet and went directly back to Derek. I handed it to him, and he took a good swallow. The coroner ruled my father's death a suicide. Open and shut, he said. No need to waste money on an autopsy. But my mother had different ideas. Do you know where my mother is now, Bill? No, I said. She's in the place where they pad the rooms and scribble in coloring books all day. I took a drink and passed the bottle back. Shit, Derek, I'm sorry. Derek laughed. It was a strange laugh, devoid of humor or any emotion at all. She said that it was the masked man that did it. She said she came in to find the masked man holding the bone knife, watching my father bleed out in the bathtub. She passed out, and he was gone when she woke up. I looked at Derek and asked, Hawk, what are you saying here? Derek took 2 swallows from the bottle. I'm saying I've seen that mask before. My mother's drawn it 1,000 times. The round face, the round eyes, the double teeth. That knife, too. The bone knife. I heard the words that he was saying, but I couldn't process them. Now you're the one fucking with me, I said at last. I gotta admit, for a minute there, you had me. Now come on and pass that bottle over. I'm calling the police, said Derek. Then he did. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. I remember when my parents had the basement redone. I was 10 years old. It was an old house, so the foundation used to be set on boulders with a dirt floor. It started to fail, so they spent a lot of money to have it all reinforced with concrete. A thick slab was poured on the floor. The bodies weren't difficult to find. The initials had been etched into the wet concrete, and when the floor was broken apart under police orders, each victim was resting right under H, his or her initials, 11 bodies in all, and those were only the ones in the basement. It's not clear how many there were, like Derek's father, that never made it down there. All of a sudden, my father's late nights at the office when I was a kid started to make sense. We've since moved out of the house, and it's on the market. Nobody will buy it. I don't blame them. Derek won't return my calls. I don't blame him. I never did anything wrong, but my father did things that were very wrong, and I am his son. I wish I'd never found that mask. Story 7. 11 bodies hanging from 21 trees. The top half of Councilman Jones' body hung by a steel cable looped around his neck and tied off to an old oak tree on one end. It was still dripping blood, bones, and veins, and torn bits of intestines dangling down where the legs should start. The cable was stretched through the air over to an ash tree 10 yards away from where the other half of the body was hanging. By the legs, I have seen some gruesome shit before, but that right there took the cake. Davis, my partner, came out of the Jones house, still looking pale from when he got sick before. What'd she say? I asked. Said they were inside eating dinner, and they started hearing this phone ringing coming from outside. Thought they had a guest, someone walking up to the door getting a call, so they waited for a knock. But it didn't come, just more ringing. So Johnny goes and peeks out the door, but nobody's there, and the ringing doesn't stop. I shone my flashlight around the base of the oak tree and spotted the cell phone covered in blood. There was a clock right there next to it. He thought they had an intruder and got his gun. I said, the T's right, LT. That's just what happened. Got his gun and shouted out the door. The ringing just kept going on and on. Betty said she was scared shitless and begged him not to go out. But he charged right out anyway. She watched him from the window. Davis turned and pointed that one right there. Saw him look around, and then he bent down and picked that phone up off the ground. He looked around again, then answered it. I looked at Davis. He didn't look good. Go on, I said. Well, that's when it happened. He just sort of tore apart, and then was up in those trees. Davis looked up at the top half of the body again. He really shouldn't have done that. I waited for him to finish being sick. That doesn't make sense, I said. That's all she saw. She didn't see anybody else. Nope, said Davis, wiping off his chin. I searched the area with my flashlight, shining it over the blood-stained grass, and then up the ash tree. There was something sticking out of the side of the tree, with a length of slackened cable hanging down out of it. What the hell is that? I asked. Davis squinted and opened his mouth to respond. That's when the call came over the radio about the second body. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. It was the strangest case anybody at the station had ever heard of, let alone seen firsthand. 10 bodies in 20 trees, all of the murders occurring within an hour of each other. Each one happened the same way, the phone call, the victim answering it, then the body being torn apart and hung up between the trees an instant later. The only thing we had were the cell phones and the 10 strange devices that had been sticking out of the trees. The cell phones were all burners, as was the number that had called them all, and were dead ends. The device, as it turned out after consulting several experts, appeared to be a hydraulic tensioner of some clever and unpatented design. As best we could determine, the tensioner had been somehow used to pull the steel cable. Very taut very quickly, though nobody could figure out how to activate it. I suggested that the tensioner might have been activated remotely. Initially, my official theory had been that the phone lines was merely a tactic to lure the victim outside. When I asked the experts if it was possible that the phone had somehow triggered the device, they agreed it was possible, judging by the blood and bits of tissue embedded in the wires of the cable. At a certain location, it was determined that the cable itself had been somehow used to sever the victim's body. All of the murdered men were prominent members of the community in good standing, businessmen, politicians, a pastor. We still didn't have any suspects after running all the forensics and thoroughly interviewing everybody who even remotely knew the victims, which ended up being most of the town. For a long time, the interviews had led nowhere, but as I dug deeper, asking more probing questions, a suspicion started growing in me. My witnesses weren't telling me the full story. I had no doubt that they were telling the full truth about what they saw on the night of the murders, but they were holding something back. It was when I was trying to draw a connection between the victims. Sure, the spouses would say again and again they all knew each other. Everybody in this town knows everybody else. Some of them played poker together once a month. Some of them played golf together occasionally, etc. But there was no overarching connection they could think of, and certainly nothing that would make somebody want to kill them. But there was an overarching connection, I knew for a fact. And the more I talked to the first-hand witnesses, as well as many of the people around town, it became clear to me that everyone else knew what it was too. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. I think I gotta get out of this place, I said over the phone to my brother. He had been in the middle of preparing a lecture for his advanced engineering class at a prominent university, and I felt bad for interrupting him, but I needed somebody to talk to. I've been telling you that for years, said my brother. I thought this would end it, I said. I dug into the cardboard box that I'd found in the basement of the church where they held their meetings. My brother sighed. You know better than the tea. You know the problem's deeper than 10 men. That's just the tumor bubbling up out of the skin. You can cut that away, but the cancer's still there. I pulled a white wood out of the box, held it up in disgust, and threw it into the fireplace. Yeah, I guess I always knew that. Still felt good, though. Yes, said my brother, for Granddaddy. For Granddaddy, I said. I hadn't even been born when they lynched him, but it was an injustice that burned in my heart every day of my life since I had found out about it. So you're going to move, you don't think Hot would look suspicious? I laughed. Brother, after your magic show, these yokels will be scratching their heads for 1,000 years. And still not have the first clue about how it happened or who did it, you know. Maybe if I'd gotten more of Mom's skin tone instead of Dad's, I'd be more worried. Just promise you'll be careful. Sure, I said. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. And I was careful. I was as careful as I was when I practiced on those mannequins for 5 patient years, as careful as I was when I drove 3 states over to purchase them, as careful as I was when I measured out the length of steel to the exact millimeter that my brother had specified, the loops made in the exact locations, the tensioning device set to the exact PSI, the phone set in the exact center of the center loop. Began to think that it wasn't possible until that day I finally got it right. I tied one end of the cable to one tree and brought down the slack. One small loop for the legs and it, her one to catch the neck, and the big one in the middle, tucked through the slip knot. Then I fed the other end of the slack cable through the hole I drilled in the other tree, and finally through, with the hole in the tensioner, I called one burner from another and then answered it, well out of the path of the cable. I heard the soft click of the tensioner, now activated by the tone coming fro, the phone, and then, whoosh, it happened to fast, too. See? But I knew what was happening. First, the loop on the left pulled back around the legs, beginning to lift the mannequin into the air. The big loop slid through the slip knot and tightened as the body fell into it. The loop closed around the body with such force that the sharp wires sliced it neatly in two. Then the other small loop C caught the neck of the now separated top half of the body. After the wire pulled fully taut, one half of the mannequin hung suspended in the air near one tree, and the other half hung near the OT. That first success had come after 3 years of failure. I spent the next 2 years perfecting the process until I was able to get it right 10 times out of 10, adjusting each time for different distances between the trees and for different size bodies. I was careful, all right. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. I was carrying the last of the boxes from my desk to my car when Davis caught up to me in the parking lot. He was out of breath. LT, he said, gasping, I guess this is it. Can't convince you to stay. Nope, I said. New job starts Monday. Gotta high T the road. Oh well, I just want you to know. It's been an honor serving under you. I've learned so much, I smiled. You're a good detective, Davis. Someday you'll run this place. I hope I do, said Davis, laughing. I'll straighten this town right out. Oh, I said, yeah. This place is a little behind the times, if you know what I mean. And then Davis called me by my mother's maiden name, I.S. At the box on the hood of my car, my heart pounding, you know. Did a little digging, said Davis. You were careful. Amazingly, mind-blowingly careful, but not quite careful enough. Do you have any evidence? I asked, sweat chilling my forehead in the cool winter air. Plenty, said Davis, enough to kindle a good fire. Anyway, he winked at me. You're not going to tell anyone? Nah, said Davis. Can't say I approve, but can't say those guys weren't evil assholes either. I just gotta know, though. How the hell did you do it? Exactly. A lot of practice. I said, all those mannequins. Huh. That's right, I said, stuffing that last box into the trunk. Well, stay in touch now. I ever catch a tough one, I might give you a call. Huh? You don't need me, I said, but yeah, we'll keep in touch, Davis. Thank you. Don't mention it. We shook hands, and then I got in my car and drove off.